Okay, everyone. I wanted to introduce our next guest, Garen, and I have to ask you to introduce yourself. I know you've been working and you're, living in Armenia. So, can you give me a little bit of background and for our listeners, and then we can go into specific questions about what's happening right now.
And what is
Sure.
Garen's last name?
Megerdichian.
Thank you.
And I'm especially keen on talking, trying to get a few discussions with people who are not member of this or that party or like the organizers. So that's why I want to talk to regular people. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, my name is Garen Megerdichian. I moved to Armenia with my family 6 years ago from Toronto, Canada. I grew up in Beirut and I left Beirut when I was 18. My background is in finance. I'm a finance professional. And so that's it. And it's been a difficult year and a half since the war. So I'm pleased to be seeing that our people are waking up again and they're straightening their back a bit. And we'll see how this goes.
So let me begin by asking then, with you being in finance and the world of finance, the business, before the war, but after the so-called revolution, how do you think Armenia's economy fared? There was talk about. So did even, let's say, in a short time between the revolution and the war, was this government able to show any positive things about for itself? And at what point, for instance, did you decide, or were you always Nakhim?
We moved in 2015.
Yeah.
So this was the time before the 2018 revolution or whatever. I must say that the reforms started with Garen Megerdichian becoming prime minister in 2017 or end of 2016, and that was apparent. That was clear that they were working at reducing corruption, which was rampant and which was existing. I must say, I agree with that. But Garen Megerdichian seems really took it at heart to make the economy more competitive, to break some of the informal monopolies that we had in the country. And I wish they had succeeded in continuing that because they were on the right track. Since the revolution, I do want to say that the trend continued, and I think we have a much better situation with respect to how the fiscal, how the tax and customs authorities work. They're less leaning on small and medium businesses. And I would say that so far, the monopolies, you don't see as much monopolies as previously, where we had a shadow kind of economy, where it was difficult to compete in certain sectors. Now, my view is that I was disappointed with the new team's political faction looking at monopolizing power, starting mid-2018 or end of 2018. And my view is that when you start having less competition politically and you're monopolizing all the power levers, that eventually creates corruption again. And we're seeing that. We're seeing corruption coming back with some of the business people close to the regime, getting tenders with no competition, getting some preferential treatment. So it's a mixed, I would say it's a mixed message. I think the Ministry of Economy and some of those, as I noted, some of these bodies are working more efficiently and more transparently. But I think we are seeing the corruption system kind of springing back again, because you don't have a checks and balances. You have one party trying to monopolize power.
So coming to the current events, how did this, let's say, protest movement look in your eyes, and especially, have you been at this from day one, and do you see the crowd size growing, for instance? Do you see any issues with the tactics that the opposition is employing or maybe not employing? What are your general comments and critiques so far?
I've been waiting for this day for the last year and a half, since the end of the war, because I would have hoped that the regime had left its government on November 10th. That was a natural that would have been a natural thing to do. And I think at that time we could have come together and really figured out a government or an authority that was speaking to everybody, that was a technocrat government trying to take the country out of the crisis. But it's mind-boggling that this team really stuck to their seats, and I don't know why. Like, is it megalomania? Are they really that attached to their seats, or is this part of a grander scheme that they were really part of, and so they had to achieve something? I don't know, and I can't comment on that. But the fact of the matter is that these guys really, instead of prolong the agony of the Armenian nation, and I'm really pissed at that, because it didn't give us the opportunity to get closure and to start refreshed. And this behavior and this attitude also is reflected by the fact that not only did they not provide us the opportunity closure and a renewal of our nation, but they keep pressing the message that we are weak, we cannot win, we cannot really rejuvenate ourselves, we do not have the levers. So it's almost like somebody's abusing you every day, not letting you come back up.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased with this, with the revival that we're seeing here, because we can rise again. There's that song, I don't know, "We Will Rise Again" by this singer that I really love, and so we will rise again. It's very clear to me now.
Yeah, I have to echo those thoughts. Ever since November 2020, it's been sort of, some people describe it as not being alive, and some people describe this protest movement at least a chance to sort of breathe. Like, for instance, I myself, like seeing all those Armenian and Artsakh flags, it gives me the sense that maybe not everything is lost yet. Do we have any questions from our listeners?
I feel like I'm pouring it on a lot today, but if I can ask a general consensus on how the people in Armenia are starting to see the corruption, because very honestly speaking, I saw it almost immediately after the revolution, and it grew through personal business experiences. A lot of the clients that I had worked with and a lot of the experiences that we had personally, we were exposed to a lot of the corruption that was starting to shift in that direction. So I'm curious to see if people are starting to see it now, because it seems like there was, at least for a very long period, this delusion that corruption was like almost washed away.
Yeah, I think people are seeing that. I mean, it's obvious. First, the question of the bonuses. That's some type of really, dissecting the pie differently in a legal way, But if you're doing that and you're not achieving anything, you're getting bonuses. That's one way of legalized corruption, let's call it. But the other major aspect is that this government, as opposed to previous governments, really has hit the record in terms of tenders from one buyer. And that takes away competition, and we're seeing that it's really people close to the government that are getting these tenders. There's a lot of money being spent on construction of roads and other type of large-scale tenders. And this habit of really giving away contracts to your friends and family is now, people are seeing that. We're also seeing some of the people in authority enjoying life better, building their own teriags, So in that sense, it took a bit of time, but it's obvious that not much has changed in terms of abusing or corruption related to the how the budget is distributed. But I do want to stress that I'm being very honest with my views, is that there used to be a systematic corruption system in the economy. As an investor, for me, what really mattered was that the sectors in which we were investing had to be competitive in order for it to be efficient. And previously, we had these informal monopolies that are less apparent right now. But again, my view is that if you don't really fix the system, the political system, to have checks and balances, that corruption, even in terms of monopolies, will come back. That's for sure. We are seeing Gurzo, for example, being very present in certain sectors, buying out some companies. There are some rumors that there's some individuals, new oligarchs springing up with the egg market, for example, being monopolized and being skewed. So yeah, people are seeing that. And one comment I want to make here is that I think this is an opportunity for all of us as a nation to really take a step back and really learn from our mistakes of the past, and that any government that comes to power after this movement, which I feel it's going to happen, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, is that the new team that comes together, hopefully it's a technocrat, crisis management, temporary government, takes at heart, first of all, to unify the nation, because that's been the divisiveness of this regime has been one of the worst things that this government has done, this regime has done, and then making sure that our leadership, our political, at least in the government, the executive, we have people who are patriotic, who are competent, but also who have persons of integrity, because we can no longer afford a system in which our economy is not growing, at pretty high rates, and you can only do that by having an efficient economic system in which corruption is very low. You can't eradicate it totally, but that people are really efficient, businesses are being invested in, and they're growing rapidly, so that we can finance our.
Actually, so you mentioned corruption several times. I've been in Armenia from 2003 to 2010 running my own business. Before I started, I was warned to not do it because they would steal my business away from me, they would extort from me. None of that happened. I ran like a 50-employee IT company, which was one of the most, I would say, it was not the biggest, but it was one of the most sought after employers, I would say, at that time. There were a few incidents, but with friction, but it was nowhere in the area that, it was nowhere near where I was warned, it was nowhere as bad as I was warned about. Now, my experience is different, my industry is different, but there are a lot of people who from the day one did not support the revolution, and they argue that corruption has always been on the decline. Maybe not at the same pace, and essentially, when the revolution happened, corruption was cited as the chief reason, but was it really basically a propaganda that basically brainwashed all these people to go and support Nikol Pashinyan in 2018? Because a lot of people were euphoric. I, for instance, embarrassingly recall 4 years ago a Facebook post where I said, fine, I cannot be whatever happened, and I'm optimistic. But I think I said that, but these people like Gurzo and Gagik Zartnir, Samvel Alexanyan, they're all still around, and they were still around, and Alexanyan specifically has been able to improve his standing with every single administration. So what I'm trying to say is that focus on corruption in this area of the world, and under these circumstances, should that ever still be like the number one thing that we talk about, or is it the number 5 thing or the number 10 thing? I realize that corruption really looks bad, but when you compare yourself with Azerbaijan, who has 1,000% corruption, but they have a strong business environment, they have strong investors, and they have they won in the war. So what are your thoughts?
Interesting point you make.
Let
me address them one by one. I think corruption exists everywhere. I mean, we come from Canada, and we've seen corruption in Montreal and Toronto, examples of that. But and expecting that we're not going to have corruption in Armenia is pointless. But in a country like Armenia, given the challenges we have regionally, given our size, given our lack of resources, I think it's imperative that we quickly become a model like Singapore, because Azerbaijan has been successful because it has the resources to bear on. We have to create an economic system in which we bring in investment in technology, in services, in high-end production, and those sectors cannot really develop quickly unless there's a transparent, efficient system. So I would say that post the change of government, the demise of Nigo, I think it is imperative for us to really grow fast, and for that we need to eradicate corruption as much as we can. But I agree with you that the issue of corruption has been abused during the revolution, and recently there have been studies in which there's this analysis of different countries where you look at, I think the World Bank has done it, where you look at the actual level of corruption versus the perception of corruption, the perceived corruption. And interestingly, in Turkey, the perceived corruption is much lower than the actual levels. And in Armenia, it's much more, yeah. So, and I think that's a result of this artificial campaign. And I must say this, I'm being very blunt on this one, but all these NGOs and decades of manipulated propaganda or very soft power type investments and into our youth, into our brainwashing our youth, I'd say, and really making this issue of corruption, but also demonizing some of the former politicians. I mean, I don't like the fact that we had, I didn't like the atmosphere in the country in the case of the former president. And in the case of Kocharian, I wasn't here, but I think there's definitely an impact of demonizing some of these former officials with the expectation that preparing for the revolution of 2018. And here I want to point out one thing that really hurts me is I am pissed, and I cannot but really. It's one of the worst things that someone can do to its people, to their people, is what this government and this regime. Now I see that. I also closed off streets back in 2018, so I feel cheated, extremely. I feel cheated, and now I realize how this process has been working. So all these fake pages that I've been keeping track of, where you have 150,000 followers, 450,000 followers, really propagating misinformation and fake news across villages in Armenia and in Yerevan. And this is what really disgusts me most, is that this regime and its backers, foreign backers, have been abusing our compatriots who are not as informed as you and I maybe, who are as more worldly, people in the villages in Armenia, people in Yerevan, in other districts of Yerevan, not at the center, who are not as educated, or they're not as well informed.
They don't have access to the right.
And so really strategizing and using these latest information technologies in an abusive way to really control their information field. I came up with this term recently. It's informational rape. I don't know if that's something that we can use.
I wanted to say information warfare, but yes,
it's really and they are abusing our most vulnerable compatriots in the villages. We have investments in the countryside. I work with villagers, especially during harvest time of our apricot fields. And I can see that straight in their thinking and their behavior.
Yeah.
And that is something I think that our future governments have to tackle with.
Yeah.
Because regardless of, in addition to the political and the other, the impact, the fact that our kin are being abused psychologically, I'd say, and I'm not a man. I use my words carefully, typically. In this case, I got to say what the reality
No, I've
is.
been saying this for a long time, and I actually track statistics on, for instance, fake news YouTube channels that like Perfect TV and so on and so on. And it's, I don't know what other word to describe. It's just like sort of you see this one fake news channel operated by either a single group or a single person has more viewership than, let's say, the top 5 opposition TV and YouTube channels. And that is the problem also is that they produce like so much fake material. And as I used to work for Google as well, and I have to say that internally, it really bothered me that like when I had to like talk to different teams at Google, and I would say, here's this channel is trying to do something. The way it's set up is very difficult for a large company, because if it's a small channel, you complain 5 times and they'll get like strikes and it'll close down. But when you close down the YouTube channel of an opposition TV, where they spend so much money in producing quality content, information, it's asymmetrical in terms of the damage. So, and I don't know, I've been thinking about, okay, let's say this movement is successful and Nikol Pashinyan does go and the new government is in place, but Perfect TV will still be around. And you're right, when you talk to villagers, there are still a lot of people, especially in the regions, who believe that Nikol Pashinyan was kidnapped on the night of November 9 and 10 and was forced to sign that agreement. And he was not kidnapped by Aliyev, but by Kocharyan. So I don't know what to say to people who with a straight face look at me and tell me that. I've seen similar behavior with cult members. So that's a serious challenge. And I think that even before strengthening our army and fighting a real war, we need to find out how we can fight an information war. Sorry I took the microphone from you guys. Any other questions?
Arsene, come on, you always have a question.
I think Arsene is doing some chores, but...
I think I'm trying to load it up before I head out because I'm going to the ANC roundtable in a little bit. So I did have a question, but I lost it. I think it was something along the lines of the sentiment of the people on the street towards the this is what it is. So I'm wondering now the leaders that are sort of starting to pop up, like Ishkhan Sahatelian and Artur Vanetian, if there's any sort of changing sentiment towards these people. I've known Ange Gerham for a very long time, and it's always been, strange to me to hear criticisms of him of not being genuine about his sentiments. So it's interesting to me to see if people are starting to actually understand that some of these leaders are, what they're doing instead of just looking for political gain. Sorry, I have a follow-up to that as well. It does also seem like a lot of the younger MPs are also standing up quite a bit as well, and I'm wondering if there's any, perspective on them where they're actually taking the lead on this. I see so many young faces in front, and it's a very positive thing. Kocharyan and Sarkisyan are not really front and center for most of the stuff. So do people see that that's a transition that's taking place, that this is not the same people that have been running the country for 30 years from their perspective into the ground? Or do they see that there's a new generation of political leaders that are popping up?
That's a very good observation. My sense is that in the past few months, especially when the opposition started to take more active actions, and the old guard in a way stepped back a bit, My sense is that that was also a deliberate strategy. We are seeing the young leaders of the opposition naturally coming to the fore, and the people of Armenia seeing them and seeing how genuine they are through their actions, because that's indeed the case. They do take at heart the interests of the country and our people, and mostly I'd say they come across very genuine and transparent. And my sense is that after this is over, some of these younger leaders are going to be involved much more deeply than previously in running the affairs of the country and in the political scene here.
Yeah, that's a good question. What's next?
I may be an optimist, but during the march on May 3rd, which was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was 2 days ago. Yesterday already? Yeah, I've lost count of my date. I felt that the energy of the crowd really was there, and that this process is is going to snowball. Because people are coming out of their Facebook and their social media worlds where there's a lot of fake news, and they're hearing the voices of their co-citizens on the street. They're coming out of the window and looking at the thousands and tens of thousands of people really supporting a change, a movement, and so they are coming out of that cocoon of social media, and they're really joining the real world. And when they realize that, I think there's a transformation of their view, and my sense is that this is going to be snowballing over the next few days, and it's going to be irresistible. During these types of situations, I think the crowd and the people will enforce their will. Whether that happens, we'll see how that happens. But either they will resign, and they will start talk. Some of the MPs of the Pashinyan faction will start negotiating as to what the transition is going to look like. I'm sure there is going to be a rat race starting pretty soon. Business people or others who are close to their faction really seeing the ask of the people, changing their minds and really buying insurance in a way. And I think it's good that the opposition has really made it clear that it wants a constitutional change. So they have made it clear that it's got to be done in a legal fashion.
Right.
That will take some time, similarly as it happened during the revolution. But the trigger is going to be the need for the resignation, essentially, whether that happens voluntarily or it may be that also some of the power ministries, like the police or the Internal Security Service, essentially say that, look, you have to go, or we can't protect you. Yeah, we can't protect you any longer. So,
I was talking with my friend Alan earlier today about the next steps, because if we do believe that Pashinyan will not go or is incentivized to stay because of personal protections or whatever, then he will need to try to disrupt this protest movement. So when we're thinking in what ways he can disrupt or the government can disrupt it, I was thinking, okay, well, why is the government allowing the France Square to be used with tents set up and allowing people to congregate and build up the momentum? And I think it's always a game. Like, they cannot ban it from the beginning because they would look really bad. But I think that the cynical part of me thinks that they're allowing this to continue, but at one point where they realize that it's going to cross the so-called Rubicon that I said previously, then they will need to clamp down. And I'm hoping that the opposition has ways to respond to that are effective. I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the potential scenarios that you see coming up.
It's very interesting. I think this government is trying to use the same strategy that former governments used in the past, where during large gatherings they wanted they took the direction, the approach of, okay, let's not intervene forcibly. Let's let the energy of the protest die out.
Right.
That is a risky strategy sometimes, because as we're seeing in this case, especially when there's a natural inclination to protest, because we are in a crisis mode for a year and a half, and there's a lot of pent-up frustration, there's a lot of pent-up anger and outrage at this government. So and the opposition really planned this very smart. Their technology and their preparedness are obvious. There's a lot of creativity in their actions as compared to last year's actions. So I think all of that is really working out to their benefit. And the point is that if you're not stopping the protests early on and it's snowballing, it's much more difficult to be doing that. And this regime has much less, I would say, is much less secured in their position than Sarkisian was back in 2018. So I don't see a major risk of them trying to clamp down any longer. They can probably try using some thugs of their oligarchs. I don't get the sense that the power ministries are going to act on any order of such a clampdown on 50,000 protesters. My sense is that that's not a workable strategy for them. What could happen, though, given how close these authorities are with some of our neighbors, let's call them, is that they try to trigger a skirmish or a military incursion to take away the attention and maybe use that opportunity to clamp down and put in martial law. And that's a real risk, but that can backfire as well, because in such a situation, I think, given the circumstances, you could expect that the army or some of the power ministries will take matters in their own hands, and the regime will be removed forcibly, even in that case.
Yeah. Scenario, I guess that's the least preferred, but
it is a possibility.
Okay. Do we have questions from the audience?
Hello.
Do you have a question?
I have a comment, if that's okay. He already has provocateurs inside the crowd in the protests right now. He's just waiting for it to get bigger and gain more momentum before he triggers them.
I mean, I think that's to be expected. I want to know what Garen thinks, but I think that the issue of provocateurs is to be expected. It's just I think the opposition should have appropriate reaction. But yes, whenever you have large crowds of people who are very, very angry, it's going to be very easy to provoke them into doing things.
Yeah, the good thing is that the organizers of the protests are driving home the message that you should be wary of provocateurs, that you shouldn't be given to take the bait. And I'm also sensing that there are people in the crowd who are managing that. So especially on the sides of the marches, you have people who are looking and making sure that in case there's a provocateur coming, that's already, people don't really focus on responding to them. So far, they've been managing that well. Again, the provocateurs are also a double-edged sword for the authorities, because you never know if the crowd gets really out of bounds, what happens then. So, and Armenia is a small country. Despite our differences, I think we do feel like a family in many respects. So people are very are aware of those things, and regular folks on the street sometimes try to break fights apart. So it's not easy to get that provocateur strategy work in a a monolithic country like Armenia. In a way, that works to our advantage in this case.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, Garen.